Yeah, I know I said my next review would be Abigail, but once I remembered this was premiering on Shudder, there was no way I wasn't going to watch that first. I have been hyped for this movie for a while. Hi everybody, Anthony here from Osmanthi Productions, and today I'm going to give you my review of Late Night with the Devil. But before we get started, you know exactly what to do. At the end of the video, if I've earned it, please leave a like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss any of my new reviews. Now let's get into it. An indie film from Australia that had to do a ton of lobbying just to get the funds to get made in the first place, and you can tell there's like 10 studio logos in the beginning. It felt like that damn Family Guy sketch.
Ah, good. It's starting.
Yeah, that's what you say. I can never figure out when the hell the studio logos end and the actual movie begins.
Late Night with the Devil was directed by the Cairns brothers, Colin and Cameron, and stars a cast of mostly unknown actors and actresses, aside from character actor David Dismalchin, who has really proven how talented he is in the last 2 decades. The story revolves around Dismalchin's Jack Delroy, a fictional talk show host from the 70s that hosts the late night show Night Owls. After a pretty interesting documentary-style intro explaining some crucial plot elements, we jump into what I think is probably the coolest framing device I've seen for a found footage movie like this in a long time. Obviously it's fictional, but what we're seeing here is the unedited master tape of the show's 1977 Halloween episode, with the rest of the film playing out in real time, including behind the scenes footage whenever they cut to commercial. Anyway, this is set to be a very special show for Night Owls, pumping Jack and his show way up in the ratings. Jack, his reluctant on-air sidekick Gus, played by Rhys Auteri, and his executive producer Leo, played by Josh Quang Tart, are bringing in a medium, Christo, played by Faisal Bazi, a skeptic and magician, Carmichael Hunt, played by Ian Bliss, and the coup de grace of this Halloween show, a paranormal psychologist, June, played by Laura Gordon, and her apparently possessed patient, Lily, played by Ingrid Torelli.
June Ross Mitchell and Lily, the young subject of the book, Conversations with the Devil.
After a few interesting things happen on air, all of which are of course debunked by the cynic, Jack can smell the ratings in the air and decides to basically force June to bring out the demon that's possessing Lily.
Not a great plan.
And what happens from there, you'll have to find out for yourself. I love this movie. Everything from the framing device I mentioned earlier, to the performances, to the set design, and even the brief glimpses of practical effects are all brought to the screen so earnestly and passionately that if you're a fan of horror, it's nearly impossible not to get sucked into this film. David Dismalchin starts off giving what seems like a pretty typical performance emulating a 70s TV personality, but as the movie goes on and you learn more about Jack, his fears, his regrets, and his desires, revealed through some pretty clever writing and visuals, the more I realized just how layered his performance actually was, and Dismalchin truly brings his A-game to pull this off. The rest of the cast is great here too, especially Ian Bliss, who just plays an asshole that you love to hate with Carmichael Hunt.
Pardon my French, but you're an asshole!
But the real standout here, aside from David Dismalchin, is Ingrid Torelli as Lily. From the second she comes on screen, you just get this unshakable, uneasy feeling, especially when you see her demeanor that is just way too calm and polite, along with the fact that throughout her first appearance in the film, all she does is stare directly into the camera. That aspect, the whole taped live show playing out in real time thing, truly elevates every part of this low budget movie. But it really does wonders for the creep factor that Torelli brings to the screen here.
Good to see you again, Jack.
Lily.
In her first full feature film, no less. And just like a lot of great horror films of recent memory, there's a lot of comedy that's drawn out from the framing device here. Like if we just witness something terrifying and horrible and Jack has to still plug something to cut to commercial.
No. We'll do it live! F*** it! Do it live!
Or with the interactions that the cynical Carmichael has with the guests in the audience that are usually full of animosity.
Asshole!
But the comedy never gets to the point where it sticks out like a sore thumb and overshadows the rest of the movie. If anything, it just goes the extra mile to help you feel like you're watching an authentic taping of a late night show. And, of course, the film does a great job playing up its horror and thriller aspects here. Expertly built up with little crumbs here and there that gradually go bigger and bigger until shit completely hits the fan by the end. The camera is almost like a character here too, observing the horror and evil on display, while funnily enough, being a bit of an unreliable narrator. I won't spoil how, but there are a few moments in this film where you really cannot trust anything you're seeing. And once the movie recontextualizes the scene that you just watched, it's honestly mind-blowing every single time. I truly didn't predict anywhere this film was going. I mentioned some practical effects earlier too, and though the movie isn't heavy on it, when these practical effects are used, they look heavily inspired by vintage practical effects from 70s films, and it definitely worked for me. It only lost me a bit, and this is like my only complaint by the way, whenever they decide to introduce digital effects into the story, because that's the moment where the low budget is the most obvious, and those effects weren't the most convincing and kind of threatened to pull you out of the experience. But I just kept reminding myself this is a low budget indie film and that they did their best, and it didn't really bother me all that much. I was still fully engaged into the story and scares on display here. Speaking of the story, that is the last thing I want to praise here before I wrap this up. Just like Dastmalchian's character and performance, this story is very layered.
Layers!
It doesn't seem like it when you're just watching this show play out in real time, but when you think about the story and the heavy backstory it involves for a few of the characters, along with what went into bringing this demon about in the first place, involving things like a cult, and I just have to applaud the thought into making this work, because after you watch this, when you sit down and think about all the little pieces, you realize that this movie told a pretty deep story revolving around desires and what gets sacrificed to get what you want, but it's never fully explained to you, and it's kind of left up to your interpretation, which I really appreciated. Overall, this is an incredibly well executed indie low budget horror that makes full use of its budget with a layered, rich story, brilliant performances from everyone involved with one of the best of David Dastmalchian's career, very funny comedy that pops up at just the right times without overshadowing the horror, effects that for the most part fit the 70s aesthetic, and scares that will both shock and wow you, especially when combined with the fact that the film itself can be a very unreliable narrator at times. And that's my review of Late Night with the Devil. If you enjoyed this review, you know exactly what to do. I said it earlier. Please leave a like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss any of my new reviews. While you're at it, you can scroll down the description below, find the links to my socials, leave a comment, let me know if you saw the movie and what you thought, and if you want more of my content, you can click or tap on these cards right here. I'll take you to my review of Sting, or just over to my channel where you can check out my reviews, my shorts, and my old shit. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I will see you next time when I finally review Abigail.